So Prehistoric Kingdom's latest dev diary has revealed terrariums that will be coming in update 16, and there are loads of possibilities that can surround these new mini exhibits. So these exhibits have three configurations: amphibious, arboreal, and terrestrial. We already know of 5 of the creatures that are going to be part of these new terrariums, with Tiktaalik inhabiting the amphibious terrarium, the Ichi, Microraptor, and Archaeopteryx in the arboreal, and Compsognathus in the terrestrial. Amphibious is for largely semi-aquatic animals, so there's a load of possibilities there. Arboreal for tree-dwelling creatures, and terrestrial for those that live on land or in burrows. So all 3 of these different configurations have loads of possibilities for what animals could be included, and that's what we're going to be discussing in this video. So aside from the Tiktaalik, Ichi, and Compsognathus, we know of 6 other animals that are going to be part of this update. There is 1 insectivore, 1 piscivore, 2 herbivores, and 2 carnivores. So we're going to go with the insectivore first, as that has got a lot of possibilities. So our first animal is Mononychus as a possibility. So this dinosaur is a small alvarosaurid from Mongolia during the late Cretaceous, and it is certainly one of the more popular options for this insectivorous position, as the animal was depicted in Prehistoric Planet being a largely insectivorous animal with a long tongue similar to an anteater, and the possibility of its small claws. Well, I think the name actually means single giant claw, and it's been suggested that those are used for penetrating into logs to get at termites. A few other animals are Leptictidium, a small mammal that many would know from Walking with Beasts, being an insectivore, and it is actually an animal that is somewhat represented in the game already. There's this food amenity kiosk of some kind that has Leptictidium on it. I can't remember what it was, like a sweet treats or something. But yeah, Leptictidium having an already existing position in the game's own amenities could make it a possibility for this position. We also have Confuciusornis, a small bird that inhabited the forests of, I believe, China during the Cretaceous. There are many species, and there could be potentially alternate species to be picked for this. But they're a colourful bird, and I would love to see them alongside our other flying animals. Speaking of flying animals, we also have the various flying lizards from the Permian, such as Whaleotosaurus and Coelurosauravus. Both these lizards are quite well known and would actually be a very interesting addition to have small gliding lizards in Prehistoric Kingdom, as there are certainly a load to choose from, but I would certainly go for Whaleotosaurus, as I believe it was the lizard in Primeval, which was a show released by the BBC a few years ago. And our last consideration is a group of pterosaurs called the Anurognathids, and why not just go with Anurognathids itself? These small pterosaurs are quite peculiar in their appearance, without the obvious beaks of their much better known relatives, but they're quite small, so they could certainly fit the category of a terrarium species. Now we move on to the piscivore. So when an animal's a piscivore, it generally can be semi-aquatic as well. Either that or lives around water to some capacity. Now there are various animals that can qualify for this, but I've selected 5. First being Holscaraptor, a relative of dromaeosaurs. I actually can't remember if it's a subfamily of dromaeosaurs or not, but these guys are quite small, about the same size as a modern cormorant, and would have hunted fish by swimming around or even just walking around in water where fish exist. And they would catch them similar to a Spinosaur or many fish-catching birds today. We also have Megalograptus, a large eurypterid from the Ordovician, that would be a very fun addition, as it has certainly become probably the most popular sea scorpion in paleomedia, thanks to its representation in Chased by Sea Monsters with Nigel Marven, who is part of this game, so yeah, it's certainly a possibility. We also have Pterodactylus, a small pterosaur from the Jurassic period. Now, we haven't really gotten any knowledge of when pterosaurs would be added, but that's probably more the free-flying kind. When it comes to the exhibits, pterosaurs are certainly more likely, as pterodactyls and the Anuregnathids are quite small animals, so they could certainly fit in these terrariums. We also have Crassigyrinus, another animal that Nigel Marvin had a run-in with in Prehistoric Park. So this is an amphibian that dwelled the swamps of the Carboniferous, hunting fish and all sorts of other animals in the water, and was one of the bigger predators in those rivers at the time. And I would certainly love to see this fella, as large amphibians and other prehistoric Paleozoic species are certainly underrepresented in like these park building games, as I think Jurassic World Evolution 2 only has 3. The Dunkleosteus, Dimetrodon, and Lystrosaurus. Yeah, I think that's all of them. But Crassigyrinus, given its history with Nigel Marvin, I think would be a very fun one to add in. Crassigyrinus scoticus, as it's called. And our last animal is Mesosaurus, a very I say a very well known. It's an animal that is associated with the theory of continental drift, a theory proposed by Alfred Wegener in discussing how the continents fit together. And it was part of his research, as this animal was found on multiple continents. And so it supported his idea of supercontinents and Pangea and all of that in a time when people were very opposed to that idea of the world being once a single supercontinent through time. But Mesosaurus would be a very cool addition, as this guy is not too large. It's about the same size as, I would say, a water dragon. At least for those who are Australian watching this, you know what an eastern water dragon is. So they're a large lizard similar to a bearded dragon, but they largely live around water bodies, and that's about the same size as Mesosaurus. And yeah, all these piscivores would be certainly diverse and interesting additions to see in these terrariums. So now we have the carnivore slot, and our first applicant, I would say, is Eucambersia. So this is a small predatory synapsid from the late Permian, a therocephalian to be exact, from South Africa and China. So this animal was about the size of a small dog, and is probably best known for being one of the few venomous synapsids that we have discovered over the history of paleontology, and it would certainly make it a unique addition. And yeah, they're small enough to fit in the terrariums, and I think would be a very cool one to see in these terrariums. Next is Beelzebufo, the devil toad of the Meverano Formation of Madagascar. So this animal has had an increasing popularity over the years as being the frog that ate dinosaurs. And it's true, it ate small dinosaurs that it cohabited with, such as small Machikosaurus, as was depicted in Prehistoric Planet, and potentially hatchling Majungasaurus, baby sauropods, and all sorts of other animals. Next up is Sinosauropteryx, one of few dinosaurs that we actually know the colour and pattern of. So this is a small dinosaur that is found in the Ishan Formation of China during the early Cretaceous, living with animals like Eutyrannus, which is actually part of the game's original roster. Just wondering when we'd get Eutyrannus, because it's a very cool animal. But Sinosauropteryx is about the same size as Compsognathus, and with its striking colours and patterns would certainly make it an eye-catching addition to these terrariums. Our last carnivorous consideration is Trilophosuchus. So this small crocodilian is from Australia, I think during the Pliocene or Miocene, either one, but it was very small, about a similar size to a modern dwarf crocodile, if not even a little bit smaller. But this animal would certainly diversify the carnivorous roster, being a crocodilian, and it would be interesting to get a much smaller crocodilian before a potentially big one. We'll be discussing those in another video. But there are certainly other carnivorous picks that are out there, like other carnivorous small dinosaurs, but these are the 4 I'm sticking to. And if 2 of these were to be those 2 carnivores that we get in Update 16, I would certainly be very happy with that. I'm putting my bets on Eucambersia and Beelzebufo though. Lastly, our herbivorous slot. So there are many small herbivorous animals that we can choose, but I sort of wanted to go a bit peculiar with a few of these. But there are certainly 2 that are at the top of people's wish list right now. The first being Simosuchus, a small crocodilomorph from the same formation as Beelzebufo, the Meverano formation of Madagascar and lived at about the same time. And it's often dubbed the pug crocodile, and it is herbivorous, even though it's a crocodilomorph. So there's not a lot of herbivorous ones that we found, and Cymosuchus has certainly gained some popularity from being a cute little herbivorous crocodilian that looks like a pug. But this is one of those animals that the Prehistoric Kingdom community has sort of said that is one of the most likely to be added, and I would certainly say, yeah, it is very likely, and I'd certainly be happy to see Cymosuchus added, as it's certainly become one of my favourite discoveries of recent years. Next is Diictodon, a small dicynodont from the Permian. You might remember these guys from Walking with Monsters as the little animals that lived in burrows, and it would certainly fit the category for the terrestrial exhibits, being a burrowing animal. But Diictodon is a very popular species, probably the next most popular dicynodont after Lystrosaurus, Placerius, and Lysoecia. If that Diictodon could be more popular than Lysoecia, I'm not sure. But either way, it's a very good animal to add in, as there are not a lot of synapsids that you can necessarily think of that would be good additions for these terrariums, or at least one that's just an instant yes. Diictodon is an instant yes, because it lives in burrows and is small enough to fit in the terrariums, and it has some popularity behind it. Next is another very weird animal, Hyperodapodon. So I don't actually know a lot about this animal, but they are one of the most alien looking little reptiles I've ever seen. So they almost remind me of a reptilian mole rat, but they have a very peculiar jaw with, I think, a beak. I think it's a beak at least, that locks together with two prongs on the bottom jaw and one coming down from the top. So it's a very interesting looking animal, and its oddity could have it added into the game. So it's certainly likely, but I feel like the two most likely herbivores are Cymosuchus and Diictodon. But there is one more animal, and that is a small herbivorous dinosaur, Aqualops. So this is a small ceratopsian that is actually going to be possibly appearing in Jurassic World Rebirth. But it's a very interesting little animal. I think its name is the eagle-beaked lizard or something, because it has a very similar beak to many birds of prey, particularly eagles, and it's often been depicted with a spike at the front of that beak. So it's a very interesting little dinosaur, has a unique appearance, and yeah, if we were to get any small herbivorous dinosaurs, it would be these small ceratopsians that I'd bet on. I wasn't going to pick Microceratops, as that has been like at the top of the Jurassic World evolution wish list for ages until we finally got it. So I was going to go for different species, but there's certainly others like Yinlong, and I think it was, is it Holinoceratops? I can't quite remember if that's the name of it, but there's certainly loads of different animals to choose from. Before we end the video, I'm going to go through a few different species that I'd certainly like to see added to these different areas, or the different configurations, that's what they were called. Different configurations of terrariums, as the amphibious, arboreal, and terrestrial configurations open up the door for so many different species. My first consideration for amphibious would be Megarachne, what was originally a giant spider, but then was turned into a Eurypterid through further discoveries. Then Diplocaulus, a amphibian from the Carboniferous and Permian, with its distinct boomerang-shaped head. Then Hibbertopterus, one of the largest and most interesting-looking Eurypterids. It reminds me more of a horseshoe crab than a sea scorpion. Eriops, one of the larger amphibians from the Permian, would be a fantastic addition. I think it's either the Permian or Carboniferous. I cannot remember which period it was from. And lastly, Mandagiria, one of Australia's most famous Paleozoic fossils, a Sarcoterigian fish that was discovered out in Canandra and has certainly become, I think, is actually the state fossil of New South Wales. So yeah, the fun fact for you. But yeah, it's a very cool lobe-finned fish, and with Tiktaalik, certainly possibilities for many more to be added. Perhaps my favorite my favorite configuration is probably going to be the arboreal, as there are certainly loads of different options of rather peculiar animals that can actually be added into this configuration of terrarium. There are loads of weird animals that have been found that live in trees, and my first consideration is Anchiornis, one of the few dinosaurs like Sinosauropteryx that we actually have found the colour an interpretation of what the colour could be. So it has a largely black or grey body fur with white feathers on the wings and legs, and a red head crest. Next is Drepanosaurus, one of the weirdest Triassic reptiles, having a prehensile tail with a claw on the end, and large claws on each front foot. It almost reminds me of a reptilian anteater, or something like a tamandua. So it would be a very interesting animal to see. Like, it doesn't fly, but it would certainly be peculiar nonetheless. Another peculiar reptile is Longisquama from the Triassic as well. A small lizard with bizarre, I think that, I can't remember if they're fans, but yeah, they're sort of similar to a sail in a way, or just a crest that can be folded and expanded on command. It's a very weird animal that I don't know too much about, but it would certainly be an interesting one, certainly an eye catcher. Next is Suminia, another reptile from, I think, where was it from? It was from the Permian. Yeah, Permian. An arboreal reptile that certainly has one of the most interesting looks. It looks more like a mammal than a reptile, but it is in fact a reptile. But it is these sort of climbing animals that I would certainly like to see more of in the arboreal realm. And the earlier times of the Triassic and the Permian certainly had a whole cast of bizarre characters. Then we have a pterosaur consideration with Pangopterus, also nicknamed monkey dactyl, due to its, I think it had an opposable thumb, that's why it was called that, but it's a very interesting animal, and certainly one of the more popular additions for an arboreal pterosaur to be added in. And it's not an obvious choice too, so like I could have picked something like Darwinopterus and that would have been an obvious choice, but Pangopterus I would go with if I was picking an arboreal pterosaur. Then the last consideration is two different dragonflies from the Carboniferous and the Permian, Meganeura or Meganeuropsis, the latter being actually larger than the more famous former. But either one would be a very cool addition, as the giant dragonfly is perhaps one of the most famous animals from the Paleozoic, so yeah, I would certainly like to see it. However, I think the way it would have to work it to keep these animals alive is have a high oxygen content in those terrariums to keep them alive, and I'm sure that can be simulated somehow. And our last configuration is terrestrial. So there are certainly loads of terrestrial animals that we can choose from. My first consideration is Ephegia, I think it's an archosaur. It's not actually a dinosaur, but closely related to the Rawasuchians and crocodilians. At least that's what I've read. So it'd be a very interesting small animal to see added, considering its importance in the evolution of one of the most terrifying predators alive today. Pulmonoscorpius is another option that I've seen quite popularly requested, and I'd certainly pick it. It's a fairly large scorpion from the Carboniferous, and also Nigel Marven had a run-in with it, so basically any animal that Nigel Marven has had a run-in in Prehistoric Park or chased by dinosaurs should certainly be considered for the game, considering he does the voice of the narration for a large portion of the game. So yeah, Pulmonoscorpius is sort of an obvious choice. Next is Heterodontosaurus, a small dinosaur from Africa with some of the most terrifying teeth I've seen on, I'm pretty sure it's a herbivore. But yeah, they've got small tusk-like teeth in their jaws that, yeah, and I've certainly seen some depictions which make it look scarier than I'm pretty sure it actually was. Next is Hesperonychus, a small dromaeosaur from North America that appeared in the Walking with Dinosaurs movie. I know it doesn't have the best reputation, but Hesperonychus would be a very cool little dromaeosaur, as it's much smaller than Velociraptor, about a similar size to Microraptor, but it doesn't glide or fly, so it would be a terrestrial animal. And another animal that is probably an obvious choice is Arthropleura, the giant millipede of the Carboniferous. Just the fact that this is actually quite a large animal, so I think it was about 2 meters long, so it might just qualify for the size of the terrariums, as I'm pretty sure they're about 8 by 12 or something in diameter, in overall size. So maybe Arthropleura could fit. Either that or it's added later. I only consider Arthropleura as we do have a statue of Arthropleura, and it is an animal that was featured in Prehistoric Park, and Nigel Marvin had a run-in with it and all that. But it's certainly the most iconic animal of the Carboniferous, and having terrariums that can possibly replicate the oxygen levels of the Carboniferous, Arthropleura would certainly be a top choice for me. Next is Euparkeria, a archosaur from the Triassic period, and sort of one of the forerunners of dinosaurs. At least that's what Walking Beast taught me. I don't know if that's still correct or not. And lastly, Peltephalus, what I'm pretty sure is an omnivorous armadillo from, I want to say, the Pliocene. It could be that. I can't remember exactly when it's from, but it's best known for having 2 small horns on its head. And it is one of the more popular terrarium options from the Cenozoic, given its size being, I mean, it's bigger than most armadillos today, but it would certainly fit in these exhibits. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on these. And that is all. So those are the terrarium animals that I've come up with that could potentially be added. Let me know what your most likely 6 animals are. So remember, there is 1 piscivore, 1 insectivore, 2 herbivores, and 2 carnivores. So let me know your lists in the comments down below, and how likely you think any of these species that we've talked about in this video are for Update 16 Prehistoric Kingdom. As for now, I'll see you all in the next one. Bye bye.